Mitch Roschelle is with us, financial expert and principal at Madison Ventures Plus. As we wait for the markets to open, what will you be looking for? I think we can expect kind of a deep dive into the reds, but how do we predict what will happen next?
Well, Marni, what I was looking for overnight was any kind of a rebound. Often what happens is when the market gets hit with a piece of uncertainty, like yesterday, the extent and depth and breadth of the tariffs announced were bigger than what Wall Street expected. They sold off sharply. Then I was looking for people to basically do a little bit more research and have the market rebound. It did a little bit, but didn't regain any of the losses. So I'm looking today to see if people have spent some more time thinking about it. This shouldn't have been that big of a surprise for Wall Street. But what Wall Street's doing, besides throwing what I refer to as the tariff tantrum, they're actually trying to bully the president into backing down because they know that the president often uses success in the stock market as something to tout the success of his presidency. So I think Wall Street's weighing in with the sell-off today.
I mentioned 2018 a moment ago. How can that influence what happens now, kind of the historic perspective, the we've been here before mentality?
Well, what's interesting about 2018, two things happened. One was the escalation of the trade war, and in there, it was steel and aluminum, but it was also the big push of using tariffs as a vehicle to get China to the table to negotiate a better trade pact between the two countries. But there was something else then, which was the Fed was, not clear as to whether or not they were going to raise or cut interest rates. And I think the market did what it does, and it tries to bully the Fed into keeping rates stable or even cutting them. So we had two influences where the market was flexing its muscles, one against the White House and the other against the Fed.
I spoke with an economist who follows these numbers closely earlier this week, and he mentioned that we're headed for a recession. Do you share in that idea, or what can we anticipate?
I think, Marni, it really depends on the consumer. Right now, all of the rhetoric is if tariffs are put in place, it will end up being paid for by the consumer. We see consumer confidence and sentiment, those indices down sharply, just leading up to all of this. But a recession will depend on whether or not how resilient the consumer is in the face of either the potential for higher prices or in reality higher prices, because our economy lives and dies on the back of the American consumer.
What about job losses, Mitch? I mean, might this create more job opportunity? What's on the horizon on that front?
Yeah, the theory is it creates more jobs. And I think you also have to take this in the context of other policies coming from the White House, lower taxes, more deregulations, and whether or not tax cuts and deregulation sort of offset some of this. Deregulation and tax cuts are intended to create more jobs. So we'll have to sort of see how this strikes a balance. Although tomorrow is a big day, we'll get the jobs report for last month. And that's a report, I would say the first report where it's all on Trump. He can't blame a bad jobs report on, the previous administration. So to me, that's the most important next leading indicator of where the economy is headed, especially as it relates to jobs.
Higher tariffs on China seem to be understood, and the president has support for that, but he has faced some pushback with tariffs against Canada. Is that concern and criticism warranted?
Well, Canada has an election coming up, and I don't think they're in a position right now to negotiate, any kind of a trade deal. I think once the election is behind Canadians and they have a new administration, I think that the tariffs aren't going to go away, but I think we're going to find, NAFTA 3.0 or, USMCA 2.0. There will be the beginning of a trade alliance between the United States and Canada and hopefully Mexico. So I'm pretty hopeful that this is a negotiating tactic as it relates to all of North America. With respect to China, the Trump administration had begun to make progress. Then COVID hit, and then nothing happened for 4 years. So I think the two theaters, if you will, for primary negotiation are North America and China. Western Europe, Western Europe has been subsidizing its own social welfare programs since World War II on the backs of tariffs charged to other countries. And they have, in my view, macroeconomically suffered for it. And the example I'll give is I don't know too many Americans who drive Renaults, which is a French car, because the tariffs are so steep. People aren't pulling them out of France. Well, you know what? If France wants to sell more cars, maybe they open a Renault factory in South Carolina or something like that, and you'd find it being a very popular car on American roads. So I think Western Europe or the Eurozone as an economy needs to think about how they operate together and perhaps, create a way to do things in other countries like the United States, which is the largest consumer market on the planet.
Mitch, always appreciate the conversation. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Great to see you.